Hello there, I'm Black Bright, as you know, and every Wednesday I do something about relationships. Premieres about 8 o'clock. I do try, but sometimes I might miss a Wednesday. And this time I wanted to talk about arguments and how we can either resolve arguments or arguments can turn into something fatal. Some arguments, if you push them too far, it can even amount in death. So I wanted to do a video to see why arguments start, to see how we can resolve them, to see if it's wise to resolve them. You know, some things is best left unsaid. You know, sometimes they say it's best to be quiet. Sometimes you have to allow things to slip under the rug. And sometimes because of your values and your morals, you really have to say something. And depending on how you say it, it can end up in an argument. So I wanted to talk about it because I think it's a very pertinent subject. Today we live in a time where it's tense, where there's a lot going on. And even though we don't visually see it, we can feel it. We can feel the undercurrents. And we know that things are happening outside that are affecting us inside. We know that prices have gone up, and sometimes, depending on your circumstances, that can make you a bit oversensitive. It can make you a bit resentful, angry, depending on your circumstances. So there's a lot of things going on, and not two people are going to think the same. Not two people are going to agree. Not two people are going to look at the thing in the same way. Everyone has a different perspective, and a lot of times it's got to do with our upbringing. We all have different upbringings, and whether or not you're in a relationship, a new relationship that's just been a couple of months, or whether you've been in a relationship 10, 15, 30, 40 years, the fact that you have different upbringings makes a big difference. Now, you can have upbringings, which means that you're in a different country, totally different from the person you're with, or you can have upbringings that mean you have had a different set of experiences than the person that you're with. But the crux of the situation is that not everybody knows what people have been through. Not everyone shares what they've been through. And so you can be in a relationship where you're not quite sure what triggers someone. And sometimes you can say something quite innocently and it ends up in an argument. And depending on where your background is and depending on who you are, you can either take it out of context, you can get riled up, and then what could have been a discussion turns out into a full-blown argument, door slammed, walk out, all different kinds of things can happen. So when we are in relationships, we need to understand who we're with. We need to understand how to communicate, and we need to know how to resolve. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people judge the person that they're with based on themselves, and they forget that everyone is different. Not everyone looks at the same thing in the same way. We all know that we all watch a movie, and some people see some aspects of the movie, some people see another. We all hear an argument. Some people hear a person say one thing, another person hears them say another. So we all extract from another person based on our lifestyles, based on our values, our concepts, and how we were raised. And that makes a big difference. And that also can either exacerbate an argument or it can dissipate an argument, depend on where the two of you are coming from. So we have the background. Backgrounds impact your perception. It can either make you oversensitive, depending on the trauma, depending on what you've been through. You can have more empathy than someone else, or you can lack empathy. You can, some people have been neglected or abandoned. They can be oversensitive when there are arguments and when somebody says something in a certain way. And I'm going to come to that about how you actually share what it is that's upsetting you. You can't really avoid arguments, but you can avoid full-blown arguments that lead to insults, disrespect, that kind of thing. You can resolve situations in an amicable way, and that depends on the respect you have for each other, and depends on how you speak to each other. And sometimes you'll find that when people are having arguments, it's more to do with the tone that that person uses. If that other person thinks that you're talking down to them, or they think that you have some kind of resentment, or you feel as though you're better than them or whatever, that can cause a lot of animosity, and it can rile that person up. You know, a lot of times you'll find that somebody says, "How dare you speak to me in that way?" The person's like, "What way? You know, you're talking to me, weird, I don't like it." And that person's like, "But I'm just talking to you normal." So for one person, normal is not another person's normal. And it's very, very difficult to navigate the different personalities in this life. We are just one person. Everybody's had their own experience. Everybody is going to behave differently to the same situation. You might find the majority of people might react the same way, and you might have some that don't. We have to kind of think about Will Smith. Now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, I wouldn't have gone up and hit Chris Rock." Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would have spoken about his wife's alopecia so that everybody would know why it wasn't a joke. But Will Smith chose to get up and sock Chris Rock. Why did he do that? He was number one, he could have felt, because we all saw him laughing, so he thought it was funny, but Jada didn't think it was funny, so he felt as though he had to go and protect her. And that was her perception, because she felt vulnerable. She was sensitive. Her hair is a sensitive part of her, so it's not funny. So what started off as a joke turned out into a massive argument. And that's what I'm saying. Depending on your experiences, depending on who you're interacting with, depending on how you say something, people react differently. And sometimes, just as well, Will Smith didn't have a gun or a knife, that Chris Rock could have been dead just because he overstepped the mark. He didn't know he was overstepping the mark. He didn't know about Jada's condition. He didn't know that she was going to react in that way. And that's what I'm saying. That's what happens with arguments. You do not know what you're triggering in another person. You don't know what's going to make them upset. You don't even know how you're going to resolve it once you've made them upset. So when you're dealing with people, especially if you want to resolve something, you need to know something about that person. You need to know something about their background, so that when they behave in a certain way, you're able to understand why they're behaving in that way, and you don't take it personally. It's really important, because it can be a situation of life and death. If you just go bulldozing in with your attitude, with your opinions, and with, "Oh, I don't like this," or whatever it is you say, and you do not know the other person. And sometimes this is why there are so many murders, so many assaults, because of how people respond to different situations. I'm not saying that every situation you can curtail. I'm not saying that every situation you can avoid. Some people have mental issues. If somebody's got mental issues, you can't rationalize with them. No matter what tone you use, no matter how you speak to them, they are going to react in a way that their mental illness dictates. But I'm talking about rational human beings who you can have a conversation with and who you know. If you don't know the person, you shouldn't argue with the person. You have some people who they get involved with other people's discourse or other people's disagreements. They do not know the background of what is going on. They jump in, next thing you know, they're dead. You have to know the people who you're arguing with to know whether or not they're rational, whether or not they're sensible, whether or not you can diffuse the situation. Sometimes they say, he who walks away lives to see another day. So it's not every argument you have to be in. It's not every argument you have to defend, because you do not know the individual. And if you do know the individual, you should know how to interact with that individual so it doesn't get out of hand. So we have, okay, that's the background and all of that stuff. So you have who started it. You have this blame thing. A lot of arguments start because of blame. Someone blames the other person for doing A, B, C, D, and E. And it's about accountability. It's about taking responsibility of what you've done, if you've done it. And it's about trying to diffuse it in a way that, I mean, if you're talking to somebody and they're going off the rails, you can just say, well, you believe what you want to believe. I don't really want an argument. I'm not going to argue with you. So when you calm down, I'll speak to you. Now, for some people, when you say that, they find it patronizing. For some people, when you're calm and they're angry, that your calmness actually makes them more angry. So it's about mirroring someone's behavior. Only you can know the answer. That's what I'm saying. You need to know the person you're arguing with so that you come out safely and you can have a healthy discussion. Is it a misunderstanding? Is it lack of ineffective communication? What has caused the argument? And are the reasons valid? You know, a lot of times people have arguments. It's not even based on anything fundamental. Misunderstanding, mishearing things, not able to communicate in a way where the two of you can come to some kind of reconciliation. You have attitude, like I said. An attitude can either exacerbate or it inflate, or it can deflate, it can diffuse, depending on how you choose to react to somebody's response. Can either send it up in flames or you can quash it. So your tone is important. Don't use any patronizing. Don't use a patronizing tone. If you're resentful, it's not good if you're resentful and you go into an argument, because it's suppression. It's suppression of anger and fear and all kinds of emotions that are going on. And you can end up saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And never have an argument when you're angry, because it can get totally taken out of perspective and people can get hurt. When you have an argument when you're angry, it's not good. You need to be able to have an argument when you're rational. My mother used to say, if she was angry about something, or if my stepfather had hurt her in any way or disappointed her, she would never argue or take him up on it on the day that she found out, on the day that she's upset. And if he was upset, she would never challenge him when he's upset. What she would do, she'd wait until he's calmed down, wait till he's forgotten about it, wait until they're in a good mood, and then she'll say to him, remember the other evening when you did the da-da-da-da, or you said da-da-da-da. That is at the point when she'll say, I really didn't like that. You really hurt me by saying that. And at that point, he's calm, he's rational, and he can say to her, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. And they can have a discussion. But if you're having an argument with somebody who's riled up, what do you think is going to happen? You're not going to have a positive outcome. Some people make a mountain over a molehill. It could be something so small. Is it worth having an argument over? Or can you just brush it under the carpet? Can you just say, okay, it's not really worth. They say choose your battles. That's a saying. Choose your battles. Not everything you see, everything that upsets you, you need to make an issue about. So it's about choosing what is important. Does it go against your morals, your principles? If it does, you need to talk about it. But you still talk about it in a rational way and in a way that the other person can understand. And I think once the two of you understand each other, it's much easier to explain without the other person getting too riled up either. Because it is about understanding. It's about understanding different personalities. It's about understanding backgrounds. It's about understanding what ticks someone off. And, taking that into consideration when you make decisions and when you make choices. Some people, they exaggerate, and, there's no conflict management. Managing conflicts is a skill. It's not easy. And it is about being sensitive about the other person. It is about being empathetic. It's about being discerning. It's about being able to look at a person and say, nah, this isn't the right time. I'm not going to raise this. This is going to cause A, B, C, D, and E. So it's about knowing your opponent. Why is the argument important to defend? Now you have to ask yourself, is what you're arguing about that important that you have to defend it, you get riled up about it? Like I said, people's principles and values are very important to them. What somebody believes is very important. And if you've got somebody who's trying to denounce that, it's like people who have faith in God and somebody says there is no God or things like that. You have to be when you're defend. The thing is that do you need to defend the argument? If you know what if you have your belief system, you know what you believe to be true, you don't have to defend it. So you'll have some people who want you to argue. They want to say there is a God, so they can say there is no God. I'm just using that as an example. So you can also have some full debate and it's some kind of competition about who's right and who's wrong. So that is not what you're aiming for. So you can still, even if you have your values and your principles, you don't have to defend them. They're yours. And you don't have to convince anybody to believe the way you do, to think the way you do, because everybody is an individual. Previous issues. Have you had previous arguments about the same thing? Is it a recurring theme? If it is, what's going on there? How come it hasn't been resolved? You need to look at things like that. What is the best way to resolve it? And can you really resolve it? You get some people, they just say, oh, just for the peace, just for quiet. They say, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about it. Let's forget it. But they don't mean it. They're saying, let's forget it, but it's still bubbling underneath. And the next time it raises its ugly head, it becomes a big issue. So you have to kind of understand that it needs to be resolved. You need to be able to talk about it so that you can genuinely feel light about the situation. When you've resolved something, there's a way that you feel and it's resolved. You feel a sense of relief. Now, if you think you've resolved something and you're still feeling heavy-hearted, it means you haven't resolved it. It means you've compromised. It means you've said, okay, it doesn't matter. Now, if it really doesn't matter, that's fine. But if it really doesn't matter, you should feel okay. But some people, they say it doesn't matter when it really does, and it bothers them, and they end up carrying this feeling of resentment, and it shows. So, do you want to resolve the argument? Some people want it as an excuse to end the relationship. Some people just argue because they want the end of the relationship. Some people argue because they like the makeup. They might like the makeup part of it. You get some antagonists that like to argue just so they can make up. And you have some people who like to argue just for the hell of it. So, and some people, they use it as an excuse. Any excuse, they're feeling bored, they don't know what to do with themselves, so they pick an argument over the smallest little thing. You can either go along with it or you can leave it alone. All depends what outcome you want. Maybe you like arguing too. The two of you can thrash it out and then go to the bedroom and make love afterwards. The choice is yours. Important in every relationship is love, compassion and empathy. And also is there still a spark? You know, you can have arguments, but it's important that the spark hasn't left the relationship. The spark still needs to be there in order to give that relationship a chance. So you can have an argument every day and you can be just as in love with that person every day. But if you're arguing and the spark has gone out, you're in trouble. So it is important that you still love each other. When we're talking about resolving arguments, it's based on a relationship where there's love, like I said, compassion, empathy, sensitivity, and cooperation. So that is important. If you're going to argue with somebody who you don't love, that's not going to have a good outcome because there's lack of tolerance, there's lack of understanding, there's lack of patience. So you need patience to listen to each other, and you need faith in order to make that relationship work. So arguments is about either you throwing in the towel. The arguments have got so frequent, but some of them turn into violence, and arguments can go right up to the top of the pinnacle, or you can reach that point where you say, I'm going to start over. I don't want any more of this. Or you can bring it around so that you're having a healthy discussion instead of an argument. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.